People sometimes feel guilty about that. They're like, how can I prioritize myself when X, Y, or Z is going wrong all around me?
Ultimately, what we don't realize is when we are saying we can't do something for XYZ reason, that we're actually telling the universe that we are not good enough to live the life that ultimately is going to lead us to a better life.
You seem to work across the range in terms of people. Why has it come to become your life's work?
It's important to me because most people don't realize that they are a product of their own decision. And it's so hard to say, I'm here because of what I chose.
Yours was around embracing risk as opposed to fearing it, I believe. And how you've come to hold it?
2 cars, 70 miles an hour, 12 inches from each other, going opposite directions. That's not risky. But the reality is we do things every single day that we see everybody else doing, so we don't view it as risk. But it is risk.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesdays Off podcast. This week, my guest is Michael Budensiek. He's a fitness professional, a strategist, and an entrepreneur. Michael has spent most of his career helping facilitate change in the lives of men and women. He believes a journey of internal self-improvement always leads to a better external existence. Michael has worked with all kinds of individuals, ranging from high school students to top-level executives and entrepreneurs. His primary objective is to serve those he works with and to the best of his ability, and to give equal energy to each person, no matter where they are in their life and in their journey. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Michael, I like to start every guest off with just tell us what you do and why it's meaningful to you.
So I always found this question interesting because as a human being, I do a lot of things, right? And so when I'm asked this, like in a public setting, I always say, well, what do you mean? What do I do? Usually people want to know what you do as a profession, right? And so what I do as a profession is I strategize / coach people through transformational change, generally starting with something health-based, but then that can lead into something much, much bigger. So I have a lot of private clients that I work with, primarily virtually, actually, and we work a lot not just on their health, but also on their business, or if they're an executive or they're trying to move up into executive, we work on them as individuals, as people, and who they need to become to hold positions of that nature. So professionally, I guide people through transformation. What do I do? There's a lot of things that I do to make that happen, but it really just comes down to ultimately, kind of like my introduction read, it's figuring out what's going on inside that is affecting the outside and moving forward from there.
I have a buddy who struggled with his business for a while, and now he's doing better. And he said, in hindsight, when I stopped working out is when the business really kind of went haywire. And now that I've started prioritizing my health again in my workouts, the business is slowly starting to come back into focus and back into play. You must have a lot of that experience with your dual focus.
Yeah, I think I think that is simply from a standpoint of, there's so much evidence, scientifically and otherwise, that says if you take care of your temple, that everything else around you will be better. And so I think that ultimately, when you can prioritize and when you can, and I say the word can because sometimes mentally it's hard to do that.
Correct.
But when you can do that, it actually does put you light years ahead of where those who don't do that would be.
Yeah. It's been true in my life too, is, you start to take care of yourself, and people sometimes feel guilty about that. They're like, how can I prioritize myself when X, Y, or Z is going wrong all around me?
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's interesting because if X, Y, or Z is happening, so I'll take you back to one of the first experiences I ever had with this was a parent. And they said, well, how can I justify exercising when I have this kid that needs my attention? And obviously we're not talking about in the time right after the baby's born. I think the kid was 1 or 2. And I just simply asked, I said, well, what kind of life do you want for them? Mm-hmm. And ultimately what we don't realize is when we are saying we can't do something for XYZ reason, that we're actually telling the universe that we are not good enough to give example, or we're not good enough to live the life that ultimately is going to lead us to a better life, or we're not good enough. It always has something to do with I'm not worthy, which is super fascinating. So with that context, generally what I suggest that people start asking themselves, well, in a perfect world, would I do it or would I not? And the answer is almost always yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, well, why do you feel like that you have to experience an imperfect journey? Like we all do. All of our journeys are imperfect. But if we move toward this idea that it can be better, perfection doesn't exist. I use that as an example of extreme thinking. If you move toward like, well, what if it was? Even like a 1% toward what if it was is usually night and day from where you're currently at, if that makes sense.
It does. And it also, in my experience, is that 1% compounds, because then you do another thing for 1% and then another thing for one. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a completely different way. We have a strategy here at Routine Rebel, which is put the cart before the horse. And it's the opposite of the adage, right? The age old adage. And it's a manifestation strategy, but it's not one kind of wired in like just think positive thoughts and the universe will provide. It's actually wiring your confirmation bias to work in your own favor.
Mm.
So I tell the story a lot. I don't know if I've already told it on the podcast, but I used to work 50, 60 hours a week. And no matter what I did, I would try to incrementally work my way down. It just wouldn't work. Like I'd get to 45 and then something would happen. I'd be back up to 60 and then maybe I'd get 50 for a while and life would be good. And then one day I just decided if success meant having to work 60 hours a week in perpetuity, it just wasn't worth it. That was the thing I had to come to terms with. That was the fear I had to let go with. That's the non-negotiable I had to define. And I said, I'm going to work 25 hours a week. That's it. And when 25 hours are done, I'm going to stop. I can't come back till next Monday. And you better believe that that changed everything about my behavior, which changed everything about the results, which changed everything about how everybody else was interacting with me, which within a very short time, 25 hours a week became very realistic. Things that were hour-long meetings became 15-minute check-ins. Things that I would just do for myself, I would say, no, I have to delegate this, and whatever it is, it is. So my beliefs changed, my behaviors changed, and everything changed around me. And I think the best way I found to describe that is confirmation bias now working in my favor as opposed to against me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, most of the clients that I've always worked with, they always say, well, what if bad?
Yeah.
What if this happens? What if that happens? And I'm like, well, what if good? Like what if is such a trap, you know? It's like we can what if our way out of a decision all day. And I simply ask, what if your way into the decision, like instead, then what happens? Yeah. Manifestation is a funny word because most of the people that like to use that word, it's all just thinking, right? You sit around and think, and then you get frustrated because nothing's happening. And my current belief, because I think beliefs are always changing, but my current belief around manifestation is, it is essentially taking your vision, thinking positively about it, and then taking an action based on that thought. And then over time, that 1% idea, all of a sudden you're an overnight success when you've been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that expression. We're an overnight sensation 20 years into it, right? Yes. So I love it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about why this work is meaningful to you. I mean, you seem to work across the range in terms of people. So why has it come to become your life's work?
I think a lot of times, when I was younger, people always discredited, and a lot of people still do, but people always discredit the idea that you could work with lots of different types of people. Everybody's so focused on niching, and I think that that's a great idea, and I think it works in a lot of ways. The niche that I have found just happens to be people. And so I wouldn't say that I specialize in any one type of person outside of the idea of, is that person open to changing? And so, it's put me in a pretty interesting scenario, because I've had the opportunity to work with people who have millions and millions of dollars. And I've had the opportunity to work with people who are at their lowest low and they can't even afford to pay. And because of that, I feel like that I have a good perspective, good balanced perspective on what most people find important in their life. The reason why it's important to me is always changing, right? And that's a really hard question to answer. I would say that when I was younger and I started in the fitness industry, that's where this whole thing began. When I was 20, and I've been in that industry for 20 years. I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago.
Happy birthday.
And thank you. But when I first started, it was literally just the idea that, man, I feel so good from exercising. If people could feel this good, I think that it would help them. And that was it. It was like, I just want people to feel better. And then obviously, as that's grown and changed and improved, and as my understandings have expanded and all the things that I've learned over the years, right now, current day, it's important to me because most people don't realize that they are a product of their own decisions. And it's so hard to be even willing to say, I'm here because of what I chose.
Yeah.
And when I can find people who are willing to say that, and they say, I'm ready to make a different choice, but I don't know how, well, then we can teach the process of how to make a different choice. And that is just so inspiring to me. I mean, honestly, it's like, I don't even get inspired by necessarily, I mean, everybody inspires me a little bit, but I don't even necessarily get inspired by the guy who went from 5 million to 10 million. I get inspired by the guy who was at 0 and went to 100,000. Like, that is so much harder. Like, so much harder. There's so many beliefs that you have to break and change and improve to get yourself from your lowest low to your personal high, but nothing comparative to what's out there. And I think that the journey is so personal to each individual that it's just cool to be able to experience and watch and see that happen. So I would say that it's changing all the time, but right now for me, it's just a matter of like somebody asked me the other day, it's probably a couple months ago, they were like, well, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? And I said, I'd do exactly what I'm doing right now. I just wouldn't charge people to do it.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't. And I think, a few years from now, I think that might be a possibility. But the reality of the situation is everybody has to have skin in the game. So when I get to that point, I have to then figure out for myself what is the skin that they need to put in the game in order to take their next step.
Yeah. When I've coached, mentored, entrepreneurs of different stages, rarely was the problem one of I don't know what to do. It was always the problem of why can't I get myself to do it? And I think that touches on exactly what you were talking about, which is the willingness, the desire, and the openness to changing, to actually trying to. And it feels to me that almost is a niche, right? I know, because it's not just people; it's people who are ready to change. And I actually want to tie this back to what you said about the question, what do I do? Because that's a question that a lot of us entrepreneurs feel uncomfortable with, right? People say, what do you do? And we may be starting a particular business. We maybe have our hands in a few businesses. We may be an investor in one. Lots of things may be going on. And saying something like entrepreneur doesn't quite cut it. You know what I mean? I was in the professional service business for a long time, so I would say consultant. That didn't quite cut it. You know what I mean? And there's nuance between what we do. And in Europe, if you ask that question, what do you do? It's they hate the association, or at least they used to work, right? And so I feel like when you ask people the question, I think what we're really trying to get at is things like, what is your identity? I think what we're hoping to get out is, how do you add value to the world?
Mm.
Right? I think the question is, how do you spend the majority of your time? Like, that's kind of what we're trying to parse, which are all just ways to get to know someone better, right? They're all just ways, but it doesn't come across it like that. It comes across as like, what is your profession?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I understand due to my experiences that I am very different. but I have, I would say, somewhat a gift, but also a gift that's been crafted into a well-sharpened skill of what types of questions to ask, which helps me when I'm asking or wanting to get to know somebody else, because I can ask them a very specific question instead of, so like open-ended about what do you do. It can be like, what do you enjoy about what you do?
Yeah.
And then that opens the door for, 1,000 different pathways that could go anywhere in the conversation. And sometimes it's not even like, sometimes it's even more narrow than that. It's like, what do you enjoy about the work that you do?
Right.
Or who do you serve? Or why do you serve them? And so I think that as humans, I think it could always just benefit all of us to just get better at thinking about them as another person and not them as just an operational,
it's
robot.
Yeah, an NPC.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
when we were doing our pre-call, we talked about ways in which people can change their thinking that will help them, right? What is a lie that people believe, or a truth that they should believe, that you've given yourself permission? And yours was around risk. Yours was around embracing risk as opposed to fearing it, I believe. Do you want to say a little bit more about that belief and how you've come to hold it?
There's risk in everything that we do, right? And I think a lot of times, or at least the discussions that I've had, I try to get better about generalizing statements. So sometimes I'll repeat myself trying to identify exactly what I'm saying. What I have come to learn and understand is that the reason why we choose not to do something a lot of times is because of what we fear. So that would be risk, right? It's risky. It seems scary. It's uncertain. It's unknown. What's on the other side of, all of those things? I don't know. And the most interesting comparison here for me early on, like when I really started to understand this thought process of risk is scary for most people, was in weight loss journeys. You'd see people who wanted to lose 100 pounds, they'd lose 20 or 30, and they'd gain 30 or 40. And then they'd lose 40 or 50, and then they'd gain 50 or 60. And they always ended up worse off than they were when they started the first time. And after getting to know several of these people and just trying to understand the decisions and the life choices, and it was always fear of losing who they had and who they knew. Because if they were the only one in their group to lose 100 pounds and no one else in their group lost 100 pounds, they would be ostracized from that group. But they wouldn't be an inspiration. They would be, oh, of course you're doing that.
Right.
Oh, of course you're. And that fear is risky. Like losing a friend is risky. Asking a specific question is risky. Like putting yourself out there is risky. Everything is risk. But what we don't realize is the biggest risks we take are things that we think as humans we believe are normal. Like driving your car every day. That's a risk. I think this is the analogy that I used when you and I were speaking, but I was riding in a car with a buddy of mine like 3 months ago. And we were on a 2-lane road. So we were headed north, cars are coming south, and we're having a conversation about the same thing, risk. He's wanting to stop what he's doing and get into something new. And he's like, yeah, it's just a lot of change. It's a lot of different things. And there's some things I got to learn. And I said, yeah, it's risky. And he said, yeah, exactly. It's risky. And I said, it's strange. I said, we're going about 70 miles an hour right now? He said, yeah, because he was driving. I said, that car coming this way is probably going 70 miles an hour. I said, you trust fully that person doesn't want to die today. Like, why? Like, that is 2 cars, 70 miles an hour, 12 inches from each other, going opposite directions. That's not risky? Now, some people are going to hear this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to drive on a 2-lane road again. Because that's how avoidant they are to the idea of risk. But the reality is we do things every single day that we see everybody else doing, so we don't view it as risk. But it is risk. Mm-hmm. It's risk to wake up in the morning. It's risk to go for a walk. It's a risk to go to the grocery store.
There's an invisible risk that surrounds us all the time that we don't pay any attention to.
Absolutely. So for me, when I realized that every decision we have, everything that we do has a risk, then it becomes more about, okay, well, I'm going to embrace things that I desire that feel risky and just see what happens. Some of them work out, some of them don't. That is life, right? But the risk isn't different. The risk is the same. The risk of being in that car is the same amount of risk, technically, as it would be for this person to quit his job and start a business. Now, financially, it might be different. Emotionally, it's probably different. Mentally, it's definitely different. But it's the same.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it's like, I think if people understood more, or people who are ready, if they understood more, that the risks that they take to move toward their desire or toward their vision, and vision's a big thing for me, but if they took the risk on the things to move toward their vision, they would realize that those risks are actually almost the portals or the doorways that they have to enter in order to, it's almost like what's that word? It's a rite of passage,
yeah.
Right? That risk is a rite of passage. Like once you take it on, it just disappears and it's gone. And you're like, oh, well, that wasn't so bad.
So what strikes me about what you're saying is you're basically saying give yourself permission to pursue change, because the reason you're stopping yourself is you're saying that change is risky, but in the meantime, you're settling for all the risk that's around you anyway and that you are invisible to.
You're 100% on.
What strikes me as interesting is what's fundamentally changing is the identity of the person. In the example of the person who wanted to lose weight, they start taking on the habits, behaviors, activities that their social group does not take on, right? So then they are fundamentally changing as a person, and now they have a different identity, and they have to confront, wait, that identity is not the one that used to fit into that group. So they either need to grieve the loss of the old identity and move on, or they, and their friends may accept them, may not, you don't really know, right? Or they need to do what you're saying they did, is they would just revert back into, this is the identity that my friends love. This is the identity that I'm comfortable with. This is the identity I've always been. And that is, I can understand why people find that uncomfortable, because you're fundamentally becoming a new person. Now, we are fundamentally becoming new people every single day, whether we want it or not. The question is, do you want to be proactive about it, or do you just want to be reactive and let the world shape who you are?
Yes, exactly. I think that we don't realize, and I say we because I've been in these positions.
Sure.
We don't realize how much we are changing even when we choose resistance to change.
Yeah.
The really unfortunate part, as people, most people are pack animals, right? And unfortunately, I've seen more situations in which the person changing their identity was rejected.
Mm-hmm.
than accepted. And that's with every group. The one couple that got the divorce and the whole group that wasn't, or the one couple that wasn't in the whole group that had been. The weight loss thing, the financial thing, right? Oh, well, all of us have been doing better the last 3 years and they haven't. Like, let's stop inviting them to things. Like, it's so weird that we become so accustomed to, and you see this a lot, and I'm not bashing church by any means, but you see this a lot in religious context, mm-hmm. right? Even a church against a church, right? I mean, like, guys, we're all trying to do the same thing here, but a church will speak badly about another church, and it's just like everybody's got their pack, everybody's got their thing, and I think that part of being willing and open to taking a risk is changing the mindset of closed-minded to open-mindedness. And I think there's a lot of freedom there.
I don't know if this analogy is going to land, but I like to sail, and my daughter and I go sailing every couple of weeks, and it's a wonderful activity we do together. And we were talking last week about sailing downwind. So when you're sailing downwind, it's actually the fastest you're ever going to travel, but it feels like you're not moving at all, because you're traveling at the same speed as the wind, and the wind in our face is what we usually use as a way to indicate how fast we're going, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
But when you're traveling kind of 45 degrees into the wind, which is about as far upwind as you can get, you feel like you're traveling the fastest you possibly can, because your speed plus the speed of the wind makes it feel like it, but you're actually going much slower than when you were going downwind.
That's hilarious. I didn't know this. Cool.
But that feels to me like do you want to stay who you are, where you're still moving. You're still
Yeah.
moving. The wind is still taking you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or do you
Yeah.
want to embrace kind of trying to transform your identity? And if so, it's going to feel like you're
It's
moving.
gonna feel a lot windier, but it's not at all. It's very slow. That's a great analogy.
I'm
Yeah, I
glad it
love it.
landed. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let me share one more. So I used to do corporate training.
Mhm.
And when I did corporate training, it was around the time I would train in the field of creativity and innovation. And around this time, the slogan of celebrate failure was all over the place, right? So I would get asked to put it into my trainings. And I would inevitably say, I know this is popular right now and you want me to put it in, but do you mean it? Are you okay with your people failing? Are you, you know what I mean? And inevitably, what I would get as an answer is people who fail either get fired or worse, get relegated to some obscure department and just kind of stay there for the rest of their
The
career and have
basement.
and have no trajectory, right? And so we started to dig into this. And what I ended up being able to put into the curriculum, which worked, was distinguishing between risk and exposure. So
Mm,
risk is the chances that something is going to happen. It's measured in percentages. Exposure is what you might lose if something goes wrong.
mm,
And in the field of innovation, you actually want risk. You want a lot of potential things to happen so that
mhm,
new realities can kind of become nascent and become possible. But you want to lower the exposure of any one failure so that you
mm,
can maximize the gains you get from the overall change. And so what we started teaching people was to figure out not so much to worry about whether you succeed or fail, but to start lowering the cost of failure so that you can keep
mm.
going, so that you can keep learning. And ultimately, it's not about failure or success, it's about learning. It's about doing something so you can
Absolutely.
get some feedback and learn, and then kind of come at it from a more intelligent position. And over time, the size of your bet, the size of your exposure grows because you gain more confidence in what you can do.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I usually use the word grow instead of learn, but it's literally the same thing. Yeah. So that's awesome. I love that.
Tell us a little bit about fatherhood. I know you're a new dad. Um, how does it feel after so many years of having coached parents and kids? How does it feel to have one of your own? And I don't mean, I mean, when you were coaching parents in the past, now that you're in their shoes, did that change anything about your perspective of how you had coached them?
So I would say that my perspective has um, gotten more clear. I had a really weird experience. Probably I was mid to late 20s. Right, didn't have any kids. Never planning on having kids. And I had a client ask me for advice with their kid. And I asked him, I was like, why are you asking me this? And he said, well, because as an outsider's perspective and someone who has no attachment to the outcome, he said, I'm just curious of what you think. After that, I noticed that it happened more often than I would have thought. Like those things happened, right? I I still find it super interesting because now that I am a father, I don't know that I would ask somebody who's not. Maybe I will eventually. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not there yet. But I will say one thing that I strive. I mean, he's only 13 weeks old. Okay, so let's give context there. One thing that I strive to be and do is open-mindedness. Openness is like one of my big, what I would say is turning into a value of mine. It's just being open to whatever happens, and then, learn the lessons, apply the lessons, and move on. And I really want to try to hold that space for his entire life's experience. I believe, based on the questions that I've gotten and based on the things that I have seen, that most parents are metaphorically strangling their children. There's no room for them to make mistakes. There's no room for them to fail. There's no room for them to suffer. And one thing as a coach that I had to learn early on is I cannot take away someone else's suffering experience to help them avoid the lesson that they need to learn. I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe that it's going to be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
My kids. I think that there's going to be times that I want to try to save them.
Yeah.
Or try to correct them in a way that I think will help them learn faster. I don't know that it exists. They have to learn at the speed at which they're learning. And if it takes longer, then it takes longer. And if it's quicker, then it's quicker. I think that there's always wisdom to be gained. But it's like, my wife and I had this conversation before he was born. She said, well, what if he comes to you and he asks you for advice, and then he ignores your advice, or you see that he's doing it wrong? Will you be able to just let him? And I said, I want to be able to just let him, because I've gotten really good at that with coaching. Like my clients, like sometimes it's just like, obviously it just kills me inside to see them make the wrong choice. But at the same time, I'm like, if I intervene here, I am taking away from something that they will learn and keep with them forever. And that's the way that I hope to be with my kid. How is it today? I would say that I enjoy engaging with people. I enjoy what I do. The last 3 months has been a lot of moving schedules, shifting routines, yada, yada, yada. I'd say my biggest saving grace is that my wife takes him all night, allows me to still get up at 4 a.m., go hit the gym, and then I come back and I take over so she can get whatever extra sleep she needs. That has been a huge saving grace for us. And jokingly yesterday, she said, which partially joking, she's told one of our friends, she said, it's better for both of us that he does that, right? Because there's parts of my routine that truly, I feel like if I lost them, it would be a real struggle. And we have been able to work together to make sure that doesn't get lost. But a lot of everything else has been so, I say, disrupted, that it's been a good learning experience for me. Definitely taught me a little bit more openness to like, well, this is, I think our very first call actually, when we met.
Yeah.
My wife was like, hey, I'm going to run to work out, and he's sleeping and all's good. And I was like, cool, yeah, easy enough. And then 2 minutes before I was supposed to log on, he's screaming and he wants fed. And I'm like, what is happening? You know what I mean? So it's just like, but I had to be open to that experience. I had to be open to just the reschedule. I had to be open to allowing it to be, because he doesn't know any different. And so I think right now I would say that it's pretty unthrilling, very eventful, unthrilling. But I just think it's part of it. And I think that I'm just learning. I think I'm learning a lot.
I think the example you just illustrated with your wife, and she's making the space for you to sleep and get your morning workout in, is a great example of the question we were talking about earlier, which is, how do you show up for yourself first so that you can fill your own cup and then be able to be there in a much better capacity for everybody else, right? So I think that's living proof that you do have to, whatever that minimum is, whatever that level is, you have to satisfy it for yourself, and you show up in a completely different capacity for everybody else. I remember describing to a business group that I was part of how, from a time perspective, how much of my time I protected from my clients, my team, my X, Y, and Z. And they said, how do you get away with that? And I said, because when I do show up, I show up as my best self, and I give that call 110%. You know what I mean? And so like the experiences they do get with me are so valuable that it's okay for me to then do what I need to do so that I can show up that way. Otherwise, I can't show up that way on a consistent basis for very long.
100%. No, I fully agree with that. I would say that I still become relatively uncomfortable using my life as an example, but I mean, I do literally try to live everything that I talk about. I can't stand when like somebody says that I should do something, but their life clearly shows that they're not, right? And so I try to do that. I mean, to a T. Do I get it right every time? No, but I do try.
You don't want to be a hypocrite. I hear that 100%.
Dude. Yeah. I mean, the problem is I think that most people just don't care, or they also don't realize that they are. And I think that that's a slippery slope.
I agree. For me, one of my highest values is authenticity. I love to just wear my emotions on my sleeve, be who I am, say what I have to say. And that stops me from ever being, I am constantly asking myself the question, are you being hypocritical right now? Because if you want all of this, you better be comfortable giving it to everybody else. You know what I mean?
100%.
So,
yeah, 100%. I love that.
I remember, I don't know if I was 3, 4, 5, but at that age, I remember reaching behind the couch to plug something in. And I was holding the 2 metal parts of the plug, right, rather than the plastic thing. And I kind of put it in the socket. Of course, nobody had child safety anything, right? Sure. And I got shocked. I was like, this is, you know what I mean? And I was wondering about this when you were talking about how much to protect a child versus how much to let it have its own experience. That felt to me like the other guardrail, right? Is like there's one guardrail around protecting the child, and then there's another guardrail around being entirely so aloof and uninvolved that you might as well not be there, right? So, so where in between these do we play? That's the example that that came to my mind. Go ahead.
I think for me, again, this applies to no one else. For me, it is when I know that they understand cause and effect.
Yeah.
Until then, yeah, I think it's absolutely protection. Like you don't, like he can't fall off the bed right now. That would be horrible. But when he gets to an age where he can understand that's going to hurt or that's going to, and he chooses to do it anyways. I mean, aside from obviously losing a hand or a finger or something, I'm probably going to let it slide. But it's because I believe that cause and effect is most of our world. And that's when we can start understanding, and hopefully the younger the better. You realize that your decisions hold weight. The choices that you make hold weight. And whether you think it's affecting anybody else or not, or just you, or, you know, it doesn't matter if I try to, I mean, because I did this when I was a kid. You know, my parents would say, I probably wouldn't try to set up that ramp on that rock with your bike. And I'd set the ramp up on the rock with my bike, and I landed on the handlebars in a really uncomfortable area. And I never chose to do it that way again. Cause and effect, you know? So it's like, I just believe that when they're at a stage to where they understand, and I don't know what that stage is. I think it probably is different for every kid.
I think it's different for different aspects of life, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's an ongoing process. I still can't tell you that I completely understand cause and effect in every aspect of my life. Right?
Correct. Yes, correct. 100%. So anyways, that's just, for me, it's, you know, I guess when there can be some sort of verbal communication and understanding of a interaction that says, I probably wouldn't do that, and I've been here for 40 some years, but if you want to try it, you know, learn the hard way.
What I really like about what you're saying too is the cause and effect they learn about your relationship with them, right? If you're the dad who goes, hey, would you consider X, Y, and Z before you do that? And then you give them the freedom to go try it, right? Because, you know, and then they learn that, hey, dad usually has my back, but also, you know, gives me space to grow. And so your relationship with them benefits from the cause and effect that they're starting to put together around how you two work together.
Well, I like that a lot. But I didn't really even consider that so much as I considered their relationship with risk.
Mm-hmm. Altogether. Yeah.
I mean, I want them to take risks, but they have to understand that that is the effect of taking risk. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yep. So. I love that. It seems to be such a central theme with you, and I love that it keeps coming back to it because it's such an important part of growth. The fight or flight mechanism, right? Like when you think about taking risks, people tend to catastrophize the downside, right? And so everything, even if it's not a life or death decision, even if it's not a real threat to our safety, our nervous system, our thinking, we tend to treat it as this fight or flight mentality, and it just kind of triggers cortisol and our breathing and our heart rate, and we live in these constant states because everywhere we perceive risk, we perceive it as existential, and we go down this path. And that's been a really hard one for me to work on, and a very beneficial one for me to work on over the years. And for me, I like to say I used to think that fight was the opposite of flight. So I always used to show up and fight. But then I realized that feeling safe was the opposite of both of them. Right. And just
Mm.
relaxing. You know
Wow.
what I
Yeah,
mean? I mean,
yeah.
like,
That's good. That's good.
and
That's
so
awesome.
that's what I try to do. And I'm like, wait, why am I? I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't life or death. You know,
Yeah.
like, let me just relax. Nobody's trying to eat me right now. You know what I mean? Like,
That's hilarious. That's true. No, that's true. That's very true. I'll be thinking about that one.
it, I found grounding and safety, like gratitude and safety, just kind of feeling grateful
Mm,
and feeling safe, really laid the foundation for me for all the positive transformation I've had in life. Sometimes we're forced
I
to
love that.
grow and transform. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think too, right? It's like, um, I think life is so nuanced, um, that I think some people are gonna like relate. You know, they're gonna
yeah.
relate with what you say or what I say or what Carlos says or what somebody else says, and like that's the point. Is like we're not all the same, but we can find similarities or definitions in other people that we appreciate and that we want to try to follow or try to model. And that's the point of life,
Yeah.
you know? So
You
one of the points.
you brought up the example of being on your bike and landing on your handlebars. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Were you always the risk taker? Were you a troublemaker? Like, what was it like growing up?
So super funny. I think it was like I was 21, 22 when I had my first experience with somebody else who was 21 to 22 and grew up very different than I did.
Mm.
And I was so confused at what they were so afraid of. And I was so confused at why they weren't just willing to try. And I was so confused. Again, super early in my coaching career at the time, so I had no real understanding of how to help that person. Um, but what I learned in hindsight from those experiences that continue to compound into my late, middle, and late 20s is that the way I grew up, I think, gave me a sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
Um, and I never really realized it. And I don't think it was by design. I think it was actually by accident. And so I always thank my parents for their wonderful mistake. They decided to homeschool when I was 12. So going into the sixth grade, I think. Um, I hated them at first. You know, they were taking me away from my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly learned, like less than a year, realized, like, oh, I can get up at 7 a.m., be done with my schoolwork by 10, and I can go out and make money.
Mm.
No other 12-year-old that I knew had money, and I could buy things, and I could, whatever. I think my first official job, I was 12. Our family friend hired me to mow lawns, and I started mowing lawns. And after lawn mowing, my dad was a carpenter, and so I was 13, and he said, "Well, you can start coming to me with work to work in the summertime." So I went with him to work in the summertime. That quickly turned into I was probably a tough student. I was a tough student, but I was their first. I was their first one. I was their oldest. I was the first trial here at homeschooling, and I think one day my mom's like, "You got to get this kid out of the house," and so I pretty much started working full time between 14 and 15 in construction, framing houses. Grew up in the Midwest, so that meant all summer and all winter. Um, the experiences that I gained, I believe, um, from the age of 14, 15, all the way until I think it was 19. Might have been almost 20 when I fully got out of that. I think completely changed my relationship with risk and understanding and what I considered hard. I'm 16 years old. I still played high school sports. So I got up in the morning, went to basketball practice, leave basketball practice, go to work. I would work from, I get to work at 7:30 or 8. I'd work on the job site until 4. And then I was driving at 16. So my parents were like, go get a gym membership, because I started working out when I was 13 because I was bored. and I would go work out at the gym with adults from 5 to 7. I would have to be in bed by 9 o'clock if I was going to wake up at 4:30 the next day to do it all over again. And when I was 20 and 21 and I started my professional career, quote unquote, and I was meeting all these other professionals who were just getting out of college, and they were like showing up late to a 10 a.m. shift. I had no concept or really understanding of like what that life was like. You know, a lot of people used to tell me when I was growing up, oh, you missed out on so much, you missed out on this, you missed out on that. And I'm like, whatever you think I missed out on, I probably gained in lifelong peace. Because the reality of the situation is as I've had my struggles, like everybody does,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to ask to leave class to go to the bathroom when I was 15 years old. like it's just so weird, you know what I mean? Like it's, and I use that as an example because of a story that I heard from somebody that, I guess until you're a senior, you have to ask to leave the classroom to use the bathroom. Like, it's just a weird thing to me, right? I still don't understand it. But the point is like, I think that the way that I grew up was super unconventional, but I think my parents were just trying to survive. And I don't think that it was like by design. I don't think they were like, oh, we're going to let him do these things so that he can learn these things. You know, my dad is very much he's very much hey, I warned you.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I would get into verbal spats with grown adults on the job site, he'd be like, I told you not to mess with him. You know, it wasn't like, you know, he didn't go talk to the guy and tell him not to cuss me out. He didn't go talk to the guy and tell him not to threaten to beat my ass. He didn't do those things. He said, I told you not to mess with him. So I think that subconsciously I was like, oh wow, like cause and effect. Like if I'm going to do this, this might happen. You have to be prepared. And so, you know, not to drag this on because there's so many details here. The reality of what my teenage years looked like. I never finished 10th grade school. I never went to college. I ended up with a GED and became a firefighter EMT when I was 19. Did my whole probationary year. And again, I think just along the way, I think I've just always been blessed with people with good insight, right? Firefighting is like, you know, you get into that career early, you don't leave it. And so I, you know, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like they're offering me a full-time position. Like, should I take it? Should I just do this? Even though I have this desire to get into the fitness industry and try this thing. And my captain sat down with me one day and he said, hey, I just want to let you know. And again, I didn't understand the concepts that he was saying to me because for me, this was normal life. He sat down with me before my 20th birthday and he's like, we want to offer you a full-time position. None of the other recruits who were all 22 and older, he said, none of the other recruits are really like meeting the expectation. We really like working with you, yada, yada, yada. But you've got a long life ahead of you. Don't make this decision out of fear. He said, I've heard you talk about wanting to try this fitness thing. He said, if you want to go try the fitness thing for a year, we'll take you back in a year. He said, if you want to try it for 3 years, we'll take you back in 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was so cool because it gave me so much freedom. Like I still feel it today. Like it just gave me so much freedom to be like, huh, okay. Whereas if it would have been any other situation, oh, you don't want to skip this. You don't want to miss out. You don't like risk, fear. Like what if you lose it? And so I think that along the way, I've just also been blessed with these experiences to where people were like, hey, it's a good gig, but don't give up the dream. Right. And so I don't know if that gives you enough context of how I grew up, but
it literally is him saying, don't run away from something, run towards something, right? Like, don't make this decision out of, which is really crazy coming from somebody who runs into fires for a living, right? Like, you know what I mean? So he's basically saying, don't let fear be what makes you take this job because you're running away from uncertainty. You're running away from, you already have a calling. You have a thing you want to run towards. Go run towards it, you know?
100%, man.
Yeah. How blessed. 100%. I mean, to have that.
No, truly. I mean, I've always thought, not always, last couple of years, I've been thinking like, I should try to see if I can find him on social media or something and just reach out, just for fun, you know what I mean? Because he's probably retired at this point. But it's just like, you never know. And that's another concept that I have too. It's like, you never know what you say and do, like how far into the future that echoes. Like you just don't know, And so I'm always cautioning people, like clients especially. I'm like, don't just say no or don't just say yes. Like just understand what you're doing. Like understand the context of how you might be positively or negatively affecting this person who's on the other end of the phone because you're having a bad day and you're taking it out on them. Like just give it space. Be open to whatever's happening. Because you don't know what you're truly like blessing in the future. You know what I mean?
Well, I hope this episode is the impetus you need to find him and send him the episode where you speak highly of him.
That would be cool, huh? That'd be cool.
That does give me a really good background of kind of how you grew up, and particularly it sounds like you just had a lot more exposure to a lot more of the world a lot earlier than everybody else.
Exposure is all that. I mean, if you boil it down to a single thing, it's literally what it was. Because a lot of the things I left out, right? Like there was time from 16 to 19. I had almost 2 jobs almost all the time, and it wasn't because I needed the jobs. It's because I was just hungry to get out there and like figure out what I wanted in my life. And part of the second job sometimes was my mom being like, "Well, I don't want you to get stuck in construction." So it's like I was trying these other things the whole time too. Was I tired? Was I exhausted? Yeah. But I mean, like, I don't know, man. When I think back and I'm like, if I would have had foresight at that age, like some of the things I would have chose to do, like would have probably been insane, but it's because I know what it has reaped now. You know what I mean? But exposure is absolutely it's exposure to the real world versus exposure to the safety and comfort of, and I don't use safety as a bad word. It's just like especially the comfort of take a test, study, take a test, study from 5 years old to 25 years old. And then you're introduced to, well, here's the working world. And you're like, what just happened?
I used to teach undergrad, and
okay.
I remember freshman year being like, "You do not need to raise your hand to go to the restroom. Just go." You know what I mean? Just like go, like nobody's stopping you.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Do you know why your parents decided to homeschool?
Yeah, but that story is so deep.
Okay.
So I'll give you just the 30,000 foot view. They had one other friend who tried it. And it was working well for them. And the school that I was in, I jokingly say that it apparently was a prison school. And I say that because it was 0 to 12th grade. So it was kindergarten to 12th grade. There was maybe 50 students there.
Okay.
It was based in some very niche religious setting. And almost probably in line with like a holiness or a Pentecostal. It was like a really strict Nazarene school. And they had one teacher. And to top it all off, you had to sit in a cubicle. So there was no, like, if you were caught, which you never got caught because there was one teacher. But if you were caught like turning around, looking around the room to see like what's going on, if you had to go to the bathroom, if you needed anything, you had to like raise a flag to ask for permission. And my parents just kind of got fed up with it. I think that, we were essentially, I being the oldest, me and my sister were both in that program. I think was probably a little bit behind of what her friends were talking about, who were doing the homeschooling thing. And I think she just saw it as an opportunity, like, hey, we want to try something different. He's not getting the attention that he probably needs. Again, I know that I got in a couple fights. I was probably just like, I was just dying to be free.
Well, talk about the complete opposite of freedom. I mean, like you talked about.
Oh, dude, that's why I jokingly say it's like prison school. Like, but I didn't know the school was different. It's like when I'm like a teenager, even as like a 20-year-old, you know, I would tell people, yeah, I was homeschooled, and they were like, you didn't like school? School is awesome. And I'm like, what kind of school did you go to? And then they tell me about their school, and I'd be like, well, that was not my experience, right? So I didn't know that school was different than that. Really.
Wow.
So, but yeah, no, it was rough for sure.
What you're saying about not knowing is so on point, right? Because we only have our own experiences and we don't really know what anybody else is doing. I grew up in a Greek American community and in New York City, but there was a lot of homogeneity, right? Like, you know, everybody had some kind of small business maybe, or they worked for another Greek family, and there was either construction or restaurants or some kind of food, right? It's just very, and that's what you saw. And so when you imagined your future, that's what you imagined. You were like, this is what I'm going to turn into. And most of my friends from that neighborhood turned into some version of that, and they all are kind of similar today. I had two things that changed in my life. One is that I went to a specialized high school. So I got out of the neighborhood and started going into Manhattan for school, and I started seeing a whole different set of possibilities. And two is I would work summers with my dad, who had a construction firm. We would do high-end
Oh,
renovations.
that's awesome.
And then eventually I started working for him, and he did very, very high-end work. And I got to experience just cleaning up debris and swinging a hammer and eating a dusty sandwich for lunch with the guys, and then going out for dinner in a nice suit to a fancy restaurant and talking to our clients and understanding what their world was like, right? So like my world opened up. I was like, wow, the possibilities of what might happen are endless. And that completely changed what my target was. It completely changed what I wanted to pursue, and I ended up in a very different place as a result.
That's wonderful.
And it was just exposure, right? It was nothing more than exposure, which goes to what you were saying about openness, right? And how much you value openness, and trying to do that same thing for your son and for your family, and just saying, I'm just going to give you openness to experience, because the more things you know are possible, and the more comfortable you feel with pursuing them with risk, like, which is your core point, right? The better life you can create for yourself.
Absolutely.
I love it, man. I love your philosophy. I don't know. It might just be worth ending it there, man. That was a powerful.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. That's perfect.
Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you, Michael. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
I don't think so. I think that you bring up a really good point, and it marries a point that I was making earlier, which is learn to ask the right questions. The people who grew up in a certain area think a certain thing, do a certain thing. It's just because they haven't understood to ask different questions about what else is out there, what else is possible. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. Like if you're happy, you're happy. Like I don't, but if you've got like this itch and you're just like, I gotta get out, I gotta do something else, I gotta it's because like you're being called, right? You're being pulled, you're being drawn. So don't ignore that. Investigate it. Ask the right questions. Find people who know the right questions to ask. But I just told a client this last week who's just started with me. I said, I am not here to give you answers. I am here to help you find the answers that are within you. So people need to understand that they have the answers. They might just not know how to find them.
Hear, hear. If people want to find you, is there social media you're active on? Do you want to be found?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the goal for everybody is a 50 acre compound, right? That's a whole other episode. So, yeah, I used to be super active on social. I'm not anymore, but I do check it. So, Michael B. Life, just LIFE, is my handle for pretty much everything.
Okay.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me on almost every platform with that handle. Happy to connect, happy to just hear where somebody's at. And, I always like a good inspiring story.
Yeah.
So if you've got an inspiring story to share, like it's exciting, I'm happy to encourage you to keep going.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for being on the show. Congratulations on your newborn. Happy birthday. And I wish you a lot of luck and success in this next chapter in your life, man.
You as well, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today on the Wednesdays Off podcast. See you next week.